Welcome, everybody. I'm Justin Owen with the Beacon Center, and we're back for another discussion via Zoom because we're all still working remotely, or most of us are these days. And we wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of innovation freedom and the vision that Beacon has for Tennessee to lead the nation in innovation and be a magnet for those job creators and entrepreneurs and innovators who really are changing the world, and especially in a post-pandemic world where things are changing so rapidly. We really have an opportunity to seize on that. But we want to hear from people on the ground. We want to hear from the business community, leaders who actually experience this stuff firsthand. And with me today, I'm excited to introduce you to my boss, the chairman of the board at Beacon, who also happens to be the CEO of a company and has worked in heavily regulated industries for some time, and can talk to us firsthand about some of the experiences that he has. So John Cerasuolo, John, welcome to our discussion today.
Thank you, Justin. Great to be here with you. After seeing you so often on these videos, it's nice to be alongside you.
That's right. Well, I appreciate you joining us today and giving us your perspective. You know, as an entrepreneur and business leader yourself, can you talk a little bit first, just broadly, what are some of the ways that government can foster innovation and allow small businesses and entrepreneurs to thrive rather than just taxpayer handouts? As you know, we've been heavily critical of that approach to economic development.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and the the theme of my response to that would be government should stop trying to help innovation in a sense, because so many of the efforts that they take and targeted benefits, as you described, handouts to specific companies is one of them. That while they're generally well intentioned, things like that, public-private partnerships, um, some kind of sponsored innovation efforts by government where they try to engage and get involved in directing capital to certain businesses, opportunity zones, all those things that governments try to do to help end up becoming barriers to innovation. And really what innovators and job creators need more than anything else is for government to get out of their way.
Yep.
We, there is an enormous pent up capability in this country for innovation, for job creation, for business people to start, take their new ideas and create businesses from them. And it's extraordinarily challenging to navigate through the many burdens that are placed on them and roadblocks that are placed in their way. Uh, it's countless different areas, but every little thing you do that makes it a little bit harder for a business to start up, that adds a little bit of cost. When you add all that up, you end up discouraging entrepreneurs from starting businesses because of those frustrations, because of the financial burden, and often just because of the fear that I don't know what regulations I'm supposed to follow, and I'm not sure how to do that, and it discourages people from taking risks. And really, if you want innovation, you want to encourage smart people uh, across our society to be willing to take risks to try to build businesses. And so, if government can just find a way to get out of the way as much as possible, we'll see more of that innovation and more job creation.
Yeah, it's almost like those, all of those hokey things in the economic development world. They're they put them out there because they have to, because of some bad regulation or bad tax policy. You have to give corporate welfare because our tax policy is so bad that companies won't come here if we don't. And so, instead of trying to focus on those things as band-aids, getting rid of regulation, getting the government out of the way can help, because there is a lot of fear in
Yeah.
starting a new business, particularly if you're in a licensed industry. And I know people have heard us talk a lot about licensing, but it has literally kept businesses. We had a client, Adam Jackson, who created a new software that could have been increased security in schools and domestic abuse shelters. And this alarm board that you have experience with, I want to hear your perspective on it, in our state, where you have to get a license to install security alarms, home alarms, fire alarms, that kind of thing. They said, we regulate you. And if you don't come get a license from us, you can go to jail. You can literally be thrown in jail for violating these alarm boards or these licensing boards dictates. And it took him 14 months just to get them to reverse course and say, well, actually, we don't regulate you. We don't have authority over you. That's an impossible thing to deal with in the tech world, especially. It's moved so rapidly that he literally was unable to launch his business as a result of that. You've actually testified in the legislature about this alarm board and the impact they had on you when you were the CEO of an alarm company. Love to hear your perspective on that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, that was really interesting to go through that. So I led a local alarm company for 12 years, had a lot of experience in dealing with licensing regulations. And I think licensing is one of the most pernicious um, efforts to ostensibly do something good that ends up becoming a massive barrier to innovation. And there were two issues with licensing. So from one standpoint, for our business as an example, it's just a massive administrative burden. We had to get every employee in the company registered, and they had to go through a process, and we had to write a check every year, every other year for their license. And just administratively, it was a big burden. And the whole effort, the entire effort, is on behalf of entrenched large interests in the industry trying to keep out competition. There was no other justification for the onerous requirements that the security industry has been put under and still is to some degree. Uh, it's only to keep out innovation, and it's sad when you hear from other business leaders in the industry that you're in talking openly about, we've got to keep those guys out of our state.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's not to protect, although they'll say it is, it's not to protect consumers in Tennessee. It's to protect alarm companies that are already there in that case. And so that's one issue. Uh, the case you mentioned, Adam Jackson, was just a sad experience. Although we ended up getting the right decision, it took 14 months for the alarm board to decide that no, this technology really didn't require an alarm license, which I think any reasonable person would have concluded that pretty quickly. But they put so many barriers in his way and made it so difficult for him. And by the time he went through this crazy process to get approval, 14 months is a lifetime in a new technology like that. And he was kind of outlapped by other folks that didn't try to do it the right way, which he was trying to do. He went to the alarm board on his own to make sure he wasn't going to have an issue, and ended up tying him up for over a year. So yeah, these licensing boards need a lot of scrutiny, and hopefully we're going to have some progress and some more substantial changes in the alarm licensing board. But there's plenty of other industries that have the same situation or are actively trying every year to create a new licensing regime. And we need to be moving that in the opposite direction if we're going to free up entrepreneurs to create jobs and be innovative.
Yeah, because these boards, as you said, they're there to protect the entrenched special interests, and at the end of the day, they're also the perfect example of a permission first society where you can't do something unless we, the government, gives you permission to do it. And well, not only the time that it takes to get that permission is fatal to a lot of companies, but that you have to do that in the first place it is the opposite of the way things should be. The
And not
government
only
should
that,
see what's happening and say, how do we properly regulate what is already in existence? Not you have to get our permission before you can exist in the first place.
and then on top of that, the people you're asking for permission are in fact the people that you'd be competing against if you got the permission.
Yep.
So it's obvious there's a conflict of interest when it's incumbents who staff these licensing boards. In the case of the alarm board, is clearly that way. Who have an interest in keeping out competition. It is. It's clearly not a regime that's designed to increase innovation, job creation, and encourage risk takers to create businesses. If you want to do that, you need to eliminate licensing boards like the alarm board.
So when you get to a lot of the things we're talking about are state level reforms. Why is that important from a competitive advantage perspective? Like, as a business, do you just go and say, well, we're in Tennessee, so we're always going to be in Tennessee and we're going to deal with the regulations that are there? Or do businesses go, we're going to vote with our feet and we're going to move elsewhere if the regulations are too onerous. And vice versa, if you're in another state like a California that is too heavily regulated, and we've seen this happen, businesses move to Tennessee because we. What are some of those ways we can, utilize that reality to create a competitive edge?
Yeah, there's no, it doesn't, it's not hard to see there are two things that drive those kind of business decisions on locations. And both of them are resulting in folks and businesses fleeing California, New York, and other Illinois, other states. And it's because two things: it's high taxes and oppressive regulation. And those are two things that businesses will do everything they can to try to find a better environment to work in. And that's been to the advantage of Tennessee and other states that approach those two things differently. So, yeah, so there's a couple of things. So generally, of course, taxes are very important, and a simple, fair tax structure with a low a flat rate as possible is obviously the best thing we can do with businesses. And as you said, not one-offs where you give one company a tax break. That gives folks the opportunity to grandstand in front of a TV camera saying, look at the job I did bringing this company to my state or my city. But it's a low overall tax structure that encourages all businesses to expand and succeed and innovate, not just one that grabs the
And
headlines.
creates a level playing field for them all, not just picking winners and losers.
Yeah, how awful is it to be in a state that you may have worked in, and we know cases of this, that you might have a business in that you've ran it for years and provided great jobs and been a great citizen of the community, and then you find out your competitor is getting incentives to come and move into the state.
Yep.
I mean, it's simply not fair. So flat and simple tax structure, obviously things like licensing requirements and other burdens like that, but also, another thing that ends up being a real challenge for businesses, particularly in Nashville, it has been, is just the process of doing the kind of things you need to do to start a business, like build a building
Yeah.
or renovate a building. I've been involved in an environment where we had to renovate a building, and it's a big disruption to the business, and you want to get it done as soon as possible. And time is money when you're just kind of disjointed by having to operate without a location that you're renovating. And when building permits and inspections and approvals, when that process is delayed, it's very difficult for businesses. We had a situation, we had to hire a law firm to help us get approvals more quickly and to kind of pull things through the process, because you have to have somebody who understands how the permit process works and who you need to, all those things.
That's probably a position too, right? You could have hired somebody for the amount of money that you spend on something like that.
No doubt. And our business would have been more successful had we been able to finish that work in 4 months instead of 6 months. So all of those things that take an entrepreneur's mind and attention off of his business and towards, how do I get this building built? How do I get that permit? How do I deal with this licensing regime? All of those things that take an entrepreneur's attention away from their business means businesses on the margin are not going to succeed or won't ever get started. So it's hard work to think about all the small little things that governments do, and that regulations, the barriers that regulations create, because they're all generally well intentioned. They're all ostensibly for the right reasons and for good things. But when you create a regulatory regime that is so overwhelming, it just scares away innovation. I had a conversation yesterday with some folks here, and we just found out about a labor law, a labor regulation that we were not that familiar with. And we started digging in. It turned out we learned some things we didn't know. And we had a conversation about, there's no way any one business person can know all the regulations they're required to meet. It would be impossible. You would have to have an army of people researching and keeping up with changes in regulation. And so it's almost like an environment that's set up to catch you doing something wrong that you didn't know was wrong.
For
And
no
that,
reason in
yeah,
many.
business people don't want to do that. They want to follow rules. They want to do it right. But you almost, I mean, you can't unless you devote an extraordinary amount of time to understanding every little bit about all the different types of regulations that businesses are faced with. And that's just not that's not an environment that's conducive to people wanting to take risks with their time, with their financial resources, and you end up losing the opportunity to create those businesses on the margin that, in the long run, make the difference between an innovative, growing economy and one that's stagnant.
And the impact of that, right? The jobs that are created, good paying jobs in many cases, and they're saving lives. They're creating new solutions to our health problems. And if we don't allow those things to thrive, we'll face the consequences of it. And so, in short, to kind of wrap up, get government out of the way, right? That's the key thing you said. Don't try to create some fancy new program to lure companies here. Just get out of the way. Keep taxes low, keep regulations low, slash red tape, so that you can be a magnet for those innovative ideas that will really change the world. And I'm excited because that's our goal at Beacon, is to position Tennessee to lead the nation in innovation. And I think we can get it done because we've got a tremendous team at Beacon and tremendous board and chairman, and look forward to the opportunity to really show other states how it's done.
That's the position we want to be in. We want to be a leader, and we want every state to say, what is Tennessee doing so right? How can we follow that?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for imparting your wisdom on us today. We appreciate everything you do, of course. And for those who are watching, stay tuned to our socials for an upcoming episode of Overcaffeinated. And of course, you get to hear Mark and Taylor Rand every week on Decaf. So until next time, we appreciate all you do as well. Thank you.